Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me is John Maier, chief investment officer at Global X, to discuss the four key areas that set the tone for the market and economy as we move through 2021. John, it's great to see you as always. Welcome back to Trade Talks.
Thanks, Jill.
Let's start with the stimulus package and reopening of the economy. Which sectors could see the light at the end of the tunnel?
Well, with what's going on right now with respect to concerns about rising inflation, you are seeing that financials are doing very well with higher interest rates. That's certainly an increased margins for banks. With the potential of the economy more fully reopening, you are seeing commodity prices move up. Energy is doing rather well. And if you look a little further out, potentially an infrastructure plan, that certainly would help the kind of harder industries like industrials and materials and things like that.
Are you concerned that overstimulation could lead to inflation as demand comes back? I mean, how would you position a portfolio with that backdrop?
I mean, there's always the concern that if you're overstimulating into a recovering economy, that you could see an increase in inflation. And I do believe that you'll see a short-term increase in inflation, just like Powell has indicated today. The markets, I believe, certainly overreacted to some of his comments. But I do think that as we more fully reopen, some of the consumer areas certainly will benefit as you see a pent-up demand for travel, leisure activities. Hotels certainly should do better as the economy more fully reopens.
Right, and as you and I were discussing going through New York City today, you're starting to see more life come on day by day. And of course, the reopening of the economy is dependent on efficient distribution of the vaccine. Do you think it's going as planned?
Well, we are seeing that I believe the population receiving one shot is getting close to 10%, slightly below that. President Biden has indicated that by the end of May, all adults should have access to the vaccine, so that's a positive. And I think that's a little before than many people had previously thought. So I do expect a more robust economy coming May through the summer. I think so. Yeah, it's going pretty well.
What do you think an infrastructure plan could look like, and when can it feasibly become a reality?
Well, I think infrastructure is tricky. So right now we're going through budget reconciliation, and that happens typically just once a fiscal year. The Democrats and the Republicans, it's 50-50 Senate. So there's not much that can get passed without any bipartisan support. So we're just going through a plan, a stimulus plan that's roughly $1.9 trillion. Hasn't been passed yet. After that, another $2 trillion. I think that's going to be pretty difficult to get through in its entirety. Certainly, the country needs an infrastructure plan, and that certainly would act as another form of stimulus. But I'm not convinced that we can actually get one passed through Congress.
Well, I mean, the issue is, too, where is this money coming from, right? And that goes back to the inflation concerns. I mean, we're seeing how the markets are reacting to that. Even now, we're not seeing inflation show up in the data, but the bond market appears to disagree.
Yeah, I mean, just because you're technically printing money doesn't necessarily lead to inflation. But if banks start providing more credit to those people who weren't necessarily the top tier credit, people with good credit or companies with good credit, that's when you could see more inflation.
Yeah.
And that's when you'd see rising rates.
All right, John, appreciate the insight as always. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks, and thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq.